Hey sisters, how are you feeling in your body today? I am really excited to bring you a super special episode today where we have the amazing Leslie Richards on, who is a physiotherapist that specializes in pelvic health. Now, this is something I have wanted to share with you guys and bring to you guys for before I even started the podcast, because one of the most common things I hear from you all in perimenopause and menopause is frequent urination in the night that is keeping you from sleeping well. I hear a lot of people, a lot of my other fitness friends talking about leaking when they're working out or being unable to do certain things, whether you've had children or not. And there is more to that story. And meeting Leslie helped me understand that the normalization of leaking or urinating that frequently is not okay, that there are solutions, that we shouldn't have to live disrupted that way, even though obviously there is some hormonal elements to having to wake up in the night and go to the bathroom. Most of it can be fixed. And we want to remove that normalization today for you. I want to educate you on how to improve your pelvic floor health, why it matters in menopause and perimenopause, and how to really start doing it on your own. So before we dive in, because I am really excited for you to hear about it and recognize this is a longer episode than usual for us, but there is so much great content here. So if you have to break it up into 4 different 15-minute slots or 3 different 20-minute slots, take your time, take in this beautiful content. And just remember before we dive into this, if you are struggling and you need a quick fix with your hormones and your health and your weight release, if you are struggling and you need real direction on your own self-paced direction, or if you're struggling and you really need more in-depth one-on-one coaching, I have a solution for you. Make sure you're checking out the links in my Instagram bio, as well as the links in the podcast notes here, so that you can reach out to me and utilize the tools I have for you. I want to help you. I have been there, sister. So without further ado, let's dive in. What's up, sisters? Welcome to the Period Whisperer podcast. I'm Bria. I'm your host. If you're new, I'm so happy you are here. I'm your perimenopause and menopause sister, your holistic trainer, hormone specialist, translator of your female body. I'm a recovering people pleaser and hustle addict turned body whisperer and hormone decoder. And I am here to help you de-stress your body, decode what it is saying, become the CEO of it, and own your own health, energy, and weight loss again. This show is for you, the overwhelmed, overworked, underappreciated step woman who dreams of a body they feel strong, energetic, and sane in. The woman who knows that she shouldn't just wave the white aging flag and believes in a body and life of peace, love, and purpose. But you don't just know how to get there yet. So if you are stuck in your body, your energy, your life, you are in the right spot. Let's lean in and learn what our bodies are saying to us. Hi, Leslie.
Hi.
Welcome to the Period Whisperer podcast. I'm so happy that you're here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here to chat with you.
Me too. Me too. I feel like we've talked about doing this for a long time. Even before the podcast happened, we've had these conversations that always inspire me to, one, improve my own health, but also understand that more women need some of the knowledge that you have. So
yes.
Why I'm so excited to have you here is, like I was saying before we hopped on, the Period Whisperer podcast is about teaching women how to listen to, the whispers of our body and help us understand what our body is telling us, because I think we're really disassociated from it and we're never really taught. And something that you specialize in. So I'll introduce you and then maybe I'll let you tell a little bit about yourself. But I'm so excited to have Leslie Richards on the call. She is a physiotherapist that specializes in pelvic health. And she has helped me over the years as well, pointing out, when it's appropriate to, or how you should feel in your pelvic health. And I just think what I've learned, even in the little bit we've talked about it, has helped me realize how important this piece is, how much I don't understand, what my pelvic, floor is even saying to me and why it should be a certain way and not another way. So we'll dive into that a little bit, but maybe I'll just pass it over to you. You can tell us a little bit more about you and what you do.
All right. So as Bria said, my name is Leslie Richards. I am a physiotherapist and I've specialized in pelvic health physiotherapy. I've been working in physio for I think 13 or 14 years now, and started off doing orthopedic physio, kind of the typical hips, knees, low back, shoulders, what you would think really when you go to a physiotherapist, for treatment, for help. I've worked in long-term care, so I worked with elderly and people who had limited mobility or any type of neurological conditions that limits and kind of makes them need extra assistance. And so we work together to gain mobility and just keep them feeling as good as they can. I've worked a little bit in community physio as well, going into people's homes. And it's something that I found, as I've gradually made my way towards pelvic health physio is one, the low back, the pelvis, the hips are such a common area to work with, that people have issues with. And it is an area that we often kind of get limited in our treatment. We get so far and we never get people totally out of discomfort or full function, or, a lot of people will say, I've always had I always have some chronic kind of low back pain and it goes up and down, or I've had some treatment and, but it's always there. What I've learned now, is the pelvic floor, the internal muscles of the pelvis are often, I think, that missing key or missing piece of the puzzle that would help to kind of unwind and find a little bit more or better function and hopefully less pain and just general better mobility, more functional mobility. And so that's something that's been kind of neat to work with and to see. There are a lot of just typical pelvic health symptoms, leakage of urine, constipation, pain with intercourse, prolapse, pelvic organ prolapse, that are very kind of obviously pelvic health or pelvic floor symptoms, but chronic low back pain, hip pain, pelvic pain, pain in that whole area. And even people are kind of disassociated with where their pelvis is. We don't really.
Where it is? Can you tell us specifically?
Well, if you take your hands and you place them on what we call our hip bones, right at the lowest part of our abdomen, that is the front of your pelvis. And you can follow that kind of along to the back and kind of follow that wing of the pelvis until you get to the points where a lot of people have little dimples in this area.
Oh, yeah.
This might be weird, but I remember you have dimples there. I don't know why. The things you notice. But a lot of people do have dimples. And so that's the back part of the pelvis. So they're called your ASIS or anterior superior iliac spine, your posterior superior iliac spine, anatomical terms. Yeah. So that gives an idea of the top kind of wings of the pelvis. And they join together with your sacrum. So the lowest part of your spine, which is kind of like a triangle shape or wedge shape. And then we have our tailbone right at the very bottom, lowest. And so the pelvis is actually two separate bones, that come together into the sacrum in your SI joints, your sacroiliac joints. Okay. And then in the front in your pubic bone. So you can kind of feel right down your pubic area.
Oh, wow. That's all part of your pelvis.
That is where the joint, your pubic symphysis is in the front. And then you've got this opening, the outlet at the bottom, where you can feel your sits bones or the bony bits in your bum. You can kind of shift side to side and pull the tissue aside and feel those bony bits. That is kind of the side part. So I'll often talk about the pubic bone in the front, the sits bones on the side. the tailbone at the back make up kind of this opening at the base of your pelvis. And that's where your pelvic floor muscles attach onto, through that area. They really anchor onto the tailbone. So that's another really common tailbone pain, because the tailbone is this anchor or attachment for the pelvic floor muscles. We can get a lot of strain. You can get that tailbone almost kind of curling or tucking under if you've got a lot of pull or tension in these muscles. Yeah. So we don't even think about this area. We become kind of disassociated with it. And so
I think people just automatically often say, like, oh, I have lower back problems, or, oh, like I pee myself because I had babies. I think what I found so interesting, and what I think I'm hearing from you, is that we have these common symptoms. Anything, and you said constipation as well is the common symptom?
Like constipation.
Poor pelvic health. Is that what we would say?
So the pelvic floor muscles. Did I interrupt you? Do you want
No, go ahead. No, I want to hear.
The pelvic floor muscles, just like any other muscle in our body, needs to be able to contract. I'm showing Bria here with my fingers, but muscle fibers run kind of lengthwise, and when they contract, they glide together. When they relax, they glide apart, and when they stretch or lengthen, they come, stretch apart a little bit more. Okay. And so we want to, for proper function of the muscles, we want to have this full range of motion. Mm-hmm. We want to have the ability to be able to give a little bit. We also want to have the ability to contract. And we want to have coordination of these muscles, that they're working kind of when they're adapting and firing appropriately. So I can't even remember where we're going from there. With pelvic floor function, proper function or optimal function, we want to have both of this, length as well as strength. Mm-hmm. More often than not, it's always quite surprising that tension or tightness is often a contributor, and a major contributor. We usually think with pelvic floor and pelvic health, I need to strengthen those muscles. And, everybody kind of knows about the Kegel, and, you might think I've been told to do 100 Kegels a day, and I contract. And if I leak when I do a jumping jack, we'll try to do your Kegel before, when I land from, on the trampoline or whatever it is we're doing, let's engage those muscles and contract them. And, this is delving a little bit deeper into the function of the pelvic floor. Part of its function is our core, it's part of our core canister. So we have our pelvic floor on the bottom, our diaphragm on the top, our abdominals kind of wrap around front and side, and then the spine, the back extensors through the back. So we have this canister that provides support, that provides stability, or that is what it's there for. It's also a pressure management system. So when we take a nice big breath in and our diaphragm drops down and takes up space within our abdominal cavity, creates more space up in the rib cage for lungs to fill up. If we don't get that expansion through tummy, through sides, through low back, through pelvic floor, a little bit of a shifting out, as diaphragm drops down, we get increased pressure within our abdominal cavity.
Oh, interesting. And that how we breathe is impacting it, is what you're saying.
Yeah, breath work is usually the first exercise I give to anyone that I'm working with for pelvic health, because it's so closely connected with our diaphragm. They run parallel with one another. So that is a great way of starting to get a bit of lengthening and relaxation, is just working on nice big belly breaths, trying to allow the belly to expand, noticing the side, shifting out the back, shifting out the pelvic floor, lengthening. And we often use visualizations because it's hard to connect with that area. If you have kind of ignored it, or you've had trauma, you've had injury, you've had pain, if you've had something going on in that area, it can be even become blurred in the representation within our brain. We get this lack of connection, lack of coordination, lack of ability. And so we can get this increased pressure within our abdominal cavity if we have tension in pelvic floor. We live in a world that tells us to suck in, and rather than allowing a little bit of mobility there.
Interesting. Contraction. Much contraction and not enough.
Yeah. And whether it's through abdominals, whether it's through pelvic floor, we live in a world where we have a lot of tension in those low back muscles. And if we don't have that expansion, that ability to expand a little bit, the pressure in our abdominal cavity increases, and that pressure has to go somewhere. So it might go through our pelvic organs. So whether that is a pelvic organ prolapse, whether that is in through the bladder. So every time you do a big move, whether it is, an exercise, whether it's jumping, whether it's coughing or sneezing, and we get this downward pressure, we get a little bit of a leak because this pressure's got to go somewhere. And the pressure might be too much for what that pelvic floor can maintain. And we get a leak. So if we can kind of coordinate our breath and find some mobility, some flow, some fluidity within our core system, that being abdominals, that being pelvic floor, that being able to do some of this stuff with a breath, not holding your breath when you're exercising and moving, is all going to just help with that pressure management system, which is going to help with these pelvic floor symptoms. I talked about prolapse of pelvic organs, hernias, disc prolapses, or herniations. All of this can be created through this increased pressure in our abdominal system because it's got to go somewhere.
That's so, and so sorry, just so I can understand. And then I do want to connect the dots for everyone listening, but so this pressure comes from really just our regular lifestyle or buildup of trauma, or where does this pressure even, because it's fascinating as we hit this age, and these are the dots I really want to connect for women, is if you are, most women listening to the show are going to be in this 35 to 55, they're irritated by their, perimenopause hormonal problems, and certainly lower back pain and, leaking or urination, things like that are really, confusing symptoms where we think maybe this is part of menopause or perimenopause, but ultimately, whatever it's a part of, it's something happening that your body is telling you this isn't normal. I need help. So that's first what I just want to tie for everyone here is recognizing these are just ways that your body is telling you, and it isn't normal. And no, you don't have to just live with it.
Yeah.
And the other thing I think that I want to make sure to point out is part of, what begins to bother us so much in these years, these perimenopause years, it's we've kind of already headed up to here, right? Our body is just done putting up with things not being done properly. It starting to kind of break down. And that's why these things irritate us so much. All of a sudden we just are bothered more. And these are some of the key symptoms. And likewise, when you're living in this body that has, that's kind of stressed or irritated, chronic pain, I guess we'll call it, whether it's lower back pain or, from the, a weak pelvic floor, for example, or unhealthy pelvic, how would I say it? Poor pelvic health?
Yeah, poor pelvic health. I really don't like the term dysfunctional because it sounds very scary, but ultimately that the muscles just aren't working wonderfully, whether it's coordination, whether it's tension, whether it's weakness, there are all these different things that can create dysfunction, and
so, and I think just bringing some awareness and normalization to the fact that when we are in some type of chronic discomfort, that also can actually throws out our hormones even further. So these are all things that we can get to the bottom of that can improve these symptoms that we have in perimenopause and menopause and just age in general, I think.
Yeah.
But so some of the key things that we notice if we're struggling with our pelvic health is again, chronic pain in like the back and the hips or anywhere in that lower core quadrant, kind of.
Yeah.
Constipation, you're saying, painful intercourse, leaking,
heavy. So I mentioned the pelvic organ prolapse, which a really common symptom that people express with that is a heaviness in the vagina or the area, or I one that feeling like you have a tampon in, but it's not quite right, and it needs to be adjusted. You don't have a tampon in,
right? And hernia,
and
you're saying, or even in response.
It could be related. It doesn't, could be related to just having some, not a good pressure management system.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that kind of brings me back. I think the question I asked you and then went off on a tangent was, so it's this pressure not a proper pressure management system.
Yeah.
Where is this pressure coming from?
So that pressure management system is more like the breath, like an actual physical pressure system. So if you think about the diaphragm, almost like a piston that moves up and down, when it drops down, the air gets sucked in and it increases when the diaphragm drops up. So that is the kind of physical pressure system that, but just what can lead to or create pelvic, tension or weakness or whatever, why do we get there?
Yeah.
And there really are so many different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Our mental and our emotional health is a huge one that we don't think about. Oftentimes when we think about physical pain, physical injury, physical symptoms, we think about physical
trauma
issues or trauma or, but even, stress, anxiety, depression, pelvic floor has a direct connection with our central nervous system. So that sympathetic and parasympathetic, our survival, fight, flight, freeze, or our parasympathetic rest and digest. And when we have this direct connection with it, when we are and to live in a lot of our life, just the world has created this
high level stress.
Yeah.
Chronic renal fatigue in a way.
Yeah. You got to go hard. You got to get things done. We have to be productive. Yeah. The things that our body is kind of ultimately designed to react to and go into that sympathetic nervous system is the life-threatening things. But what we perceive as life-threatening these days might be trying to return all your emails or trying to get home on the 401 or, and we're in that sympathetic nervous system so often, and that affects our pelvic floor. That creates tension. We have two areas that have this direct connection with the central nervous system. The upper fibers of our trap, so muscles right up in through the neck and the shoulders, and our pelvic. Everybody knows, when I'm tense, when I'm stressed, I feel it in through my neck and my shoulders. They've kind of found that connection, but we don't. We generally don't change anything. We find that connection, but we just keep living our high levels, high stress life and just deal with it. But then we don't notice, or we don't know or recognize our pelvic floor. A lot of us walk around in the world with kind of a tight, tense pelvic floor without noticing. And that's something that's another thing. Breathing is often a first exercise just to start working on that. But I'll say, start to notice, and whether you need to put Post-it notes around, whether you need to set a little alarm, or you just remember, but start to check in throughout your day and notice, am I engaging those muscles? Am I engaging my bum and vagina? Am I kind of tightening, clenching, like I'm trying to stop the flow of urine or holding gas? And if you are, see if you can let that go. We don't need to be in that constant state of engagement. And we end up there just out of habit, out of, for pattern, just the same way we often catch ourselves holding our breath or shrugging our old shoulders up towards our ears, trying to get out of that pattern.
That pattern of, so this was something that blew my mind that you said to me. And I think this is the area that we're starting to talk about it, where you were saying that part of like when we're in a fight or flight mode, or when we get into this place of stress, which is really common right now, constantly common. And the bigger issue is that there's no release of that stress. We're not running from the lion and then we escape from the lion and we have this like this moment of decompression. We're living in this chronic stress, in this hustle, endless world. And what you were saying, and you probably will say it more eloquently, is that there's two parts of the body that actually physically recognize that almost before anything else.
Yes, that. I think I had mentioned there's a study done where they put
this is what I want to hear.
Sensors on the muscles throughout the body, and then showed the participants that had these sensors on scary or startling things, and their pelvic floor muscles were the first to react. Even before they blinked their eyes or they pulled their heads back, the pelvic floor engaged. It reacted. So it is, when you think about it, often I've thought about this, and I haven't had the opportunity to really try this, but I think about so many motor vehicle accident patients that I've worked with chronic pain that we never sorted out. We tried this, we tried that, we tried all of these different things to try to manage it. And now I think, oh my goodness, I bet one, there was something going on with pelvic floor that we just did. I didn't have the training or the understanding, the knowledge at that time to go down that route. But even thinking about, getting into therapy, talk therapy, and working with the trauma that comes along with, whether it is an accident, whether it is, I find a lot of my pelvic health patients who I work with, who are working with psychotherapists, make such great progress because they're working on, that aspect of it as well.
It's more holistic what you're saying, because you're approaching your therapy and your growth, and really it makes the most sense. Like we think it's our body, but our body, mind, and soul is one very important, and we're only as strong as our weakest link. So
yeah,
it's fascinating.
So that's something that
No, go ahead.
I've been finding it really nice. I also see a real connection, especially in the last year that I've been practicing, of women who have hormone, their hormones are involved in the mix. They come into me for whatever symptom it is, whether it is leakage, whether it is pain. And as we start to delve, into our assessment and chat a little bit more and get into their cycles and their symptoms of their periods. And, there's 9 times out of 10, if not 10 times out of 10, they've got extreme pain. They have heavy bleeds. They have severe mood issues. It's just, so I'm quite often referring to your podcast because there's just so much information and so many things that connect, because, everything that you're saying to women to try to get them at a more balanced hormone level, really does kind of, I just repeat what you say, and it reflects on the pelvic floor and pelvic health. Like a lot of it,
that's awesome.
It's all working to get the whole body functioning better. And when one system is functioning better, when the gut is functioning better, I have so many patients with Crohn's and IBS and leaky gut. That, and when you think about the bowels, and how much our pelvic floor, as much as it needs to relax, like to have a bowel movement, to have a baby, to go pee, to have intercourse, or whatever it is you want to do, and to have anything inserted or leave the body, those pelvic floor muscles need to adjust. They need to adapt. They need to lengthen and relax and release.
That is so crazy.
Yeah. And so even coming into bowels, you can really, really get some good success in improving bowel function just with working with pelvic floor, working with breath, working, and yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I find that really interesting because, one, thank you for saying that about the podcast. I really appreciate it. It's almost like we both come to this where, because it's such a holistic thing, for people to heal and live their best lives physically and mentally and emotionally, it's almost like, I know for me with this podcast, it's like I draw you in because you have these hormonal period problems. This is the surface level of what we think they are and what we know them to be. But ultimately, it's a much bigger piece. There's more to it. Those are the things that irritate us enough to come to a physiotherapist or to come to, a hormone health coach or things like that, or even a trainer. It's like, these are the things that irritate us enough to be like, okay, I have a problem. But we don't realize it's not just a one-step solution.
Yeah.
It really is like emotional and mental just as much as it is what you eat or the exercises that you do. It's really cool.
The holding weight around the tummy, so like almost every patient comes to me and says, if only I could lose this weight, then I'm sure I would feel better. Yeah. And then, or, I get the ones that are, I have to do my CrossFit 6 days a week. And, and they're,
I want to hold those people. I want to hold those women and be like, you do not need to do that.
I know. And that's something I find I struggle because they're often quite resistant to the idea of, well, maybe you do some yoga a couple of days or, for me to send them home with a breathing exercise, they're like, this is the last thing I want to be doing. And this is trying to educate and, in a gentle way enough.
I want to just speak to those women because I was those women. I want to speak to those women, where it was like, I remember even saying to you like, I just find yoga so boring. It doesn't give me that feeling, that release. And what I have learned is, twofold. One, even Olympic athletes have, an off season or a cross training season. In order to be holistically healthy physically and we have to have that piece. So rest or expansion style workouts are equally critical for you to be your best. Also, our strength is limited by our flexibility. So if you're not flexible, you can only be so strong and your progress will plateau. But ultimately, for these women who I was these women who were like, I need that release. I need to know I did this thing. It gives me these feelings. It's the obstacle is the way. The thing you are not doing is the thing that is going to get you to that next level. And, that if you cannot sit still long enough to breathe through a yoga, or meditation for 20 minutes, that's your new challenge. Like that's the challenge you need and exactly what your body needs in order to grow. Otherwise, you're just going to bump up against that plateau wall.
Yeah. And that's what it's funny you say that because I have a few patients this past week. I have done this and I said, I try this. I don't know if it's always successful, but for those people that need, that are the driven goal setters, I need to achieve this and, make that goal slowing down and put all that effort that you're going to put into the hard stuff into slowing down. And that's hard. That is going to be harder for you. And that is going to be more of a challenge and try to get that, that high from achieving that. Rather than having to make it the hardcore,
Well, it's not hard. You can do as many box jumps as you want. If that's all you do, it's not hard for your body and your body will figure it out. So now it's time to do the thing that is hard for your body, which is often just sitting still or stretching or so I found this so fascinating when you were talking about with the pelvic floor. It's almost like, in personal training, we always think, we need to strengthen, a muscle in order to have proper form, in order to, but it is equally important. Usually if one part of the muscle is too strong, then there's another part of the muscle that is too weak. And then we get into this imbalance. And what I think you're saying, so correct me if I'm wrong, but like two things are happening. One, because we're living in this constant stress, we've almost are in this constant like tightening of the pelvic floor because it's always in that like freak out mode, we'll call it.
Right.
And at the same time, what was I going to say? And it's normalized to us to contract those muscles because of this Kegel piece. That's the solution that has been told to us and is normalized in, like, geez, I remember on Sex and the City, them talking about doing their Kegels.
Yeah.
It's what we're told to do when in reality, we need equal parts expansion and relaxation as contraction.
And that's, I pointed out the tension part, and I have to say that it's not always tension. Sometimes it is just full weakness. The muscles are just not strong enough to provide that closure. Sometimes there is some neural things going on. So if there is some neuralgia or there's been injury or damage to nerve, you might have some loss of function of muscles or loss of strength or loss of coordination. So a lot of the times it is tension, but not all the time. And that tension can create weakness. So, if there's tension, there usually is there's weakness associated with that. Just, an analogy that I'll often give is an elastic band one, which people, I think, have probably heard before, where you can have, a very tight wound up elastic band and you're trying to fling it and you don't have very much room to pull back to generate that potential power to get a good fling. So you don't get a very good fling. You have a long kind of loose floppy elastic band, a nice old one, and you can pull it back really far, but there doesn't have that build of potential energy because it doesn't have that recoil anymore.
Right.
And then you have your kind of nice, perfect brand new elastic band, and you can get a nice recoil. There's some spring to it, and then you let go and you get a good rebound. Right. So that idea, if we have tension in there, we do need to let go. We need to and stretch and kind of release so we can get that full range. You can get that lengthening or that to get the recoil or the strength or the engagement. But if you've got, some people have that, I hate to say it, but like the loose floppy elastic band where they're just, they've lost this connection for whatever reason. Yeah. And they just, and in that sense, Kegels are a nice way of starting to introduce and play with. And we might do that, as a pelvic health therapist, I've been trained to do internal work. So it's not mandatory. Everybody doesn't have to have an internal assessment or internal treatment done, but it is very helpful because it's the only way we can get, the kind of 100% what is going on with those muscles. But it's also really nice for treatment because if someone has some weakness there while I'm internal, I can have them do Kegel exercise. I can have them engage and relax, and I can get an idea as to the strength, and I can give them some tactile feedback. I can give them some visualizations to work with to rebuild that connection. So then when they go away and they do them on their own, which might be done, lying on back to begin with, where it's just nice and easy and you have no gravity, you've got no movement. And, gradually build into more challenging and upright and, all of these other movements and function. But
so I know one of the most common things that I hear from women, in these premenopause years, is a lot of this like waking up to pee and this constant frequent urination, which is then impacting their, and I definitely know hormones impact that. We know estrogen levels certainly impact that, but it interrupts the sleep and that interrupts things further and keeps us in this chronic stress. And it's this sort of cycle. Is that specifically, that frequent urination, is that a symptom of pelvic health?
Yeah. Pelvic floor dysfunction or pelvic health,
pelvic floor function. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, it is. It's and sometimes those things can be remedied, with simple lifestyle changes. Sometimes, so we have their bladder irritants. So certain things that irritate your bladder. So caffeine is one of those, alcohol, chocolate, spicy foods, tomato-based products, artificial sweeteners, artificial flavors. So all of these things that are in our diet a lot,
Yes.
Can aggravate and irritate your bladder and make you have that sensation that you have to go more often. So taking a look at your diet and trying to remove some of those and see what happens. Especially when there's leakage, when you have urinary leakage, oftentimes women will, or people will, avoid drinking water to try to avoid leaking, but then we create a more concentrated urine, which is more irritating.
Yes, I did know that.
More often. So sometimes it's a matter of taking a look at what you're putting into your body. Sometimes it is kind of habit and behavior. I talk often about our bladder and these kind of imaginary fill lines, or they're really stretch receptors within the bladder. But, as your bladder starts to fill and it hits that first fill line or stretch receptor, there's a signal that goes up to your brain, just to let the brain, the body, let you know, okay, I'm filling up. And you're going to need to go to the washroom eventually. And it lets us know that by having the sensation to go pee. Yeah. And that's, oftentimes people will think, okay, I need to go, and they'll get distracted. They'll get busy and the sensation will go away. Yeah. And so that is usually like, maybe you've hit your first fill line. You've got that signal, okay, yeah, I'm filling up. And then it keeps filling, hits the second fill line, second stretch receptor. We get the message up to the brain. We feel the urge to go. And that's often when we do go to the washroom. But if we don't, again, you can get distracted and busy, and that sensation will go away again. And then you get to the full bladder, the third fill line. And that's when it's like, okay, I gotta go. Like, it's been a few hours and there's no ignoring this. So when we have leakage, or even if we have pain, sometimes we have pain as the bladder fills. And so as soon as we feel that urge, we go. Right. And, you empty your bladder every time you feel the urge. And so we're going all of the time. Whereas sometimes it's a matter of, I'll often say with women I work with who have this frequency, when they're home alone or not alone, when they're home, they're not out and about doing this, but when they're home and, you've just gone to the washroom not that long ago, you had a good pee, and half an hour later, you get this urge to pee. And you think, okay, I know my bladder's not full at this point because, I've just emptied it. I had a nice long pee. Yeah. I'm going to stop for a second. I'm going to take a few nice big deep breaths. I'm going to try to relax and see if that urge goes away. I might get distracted with something. I might start counting backwards by sevens from 100, whatever it is you need to do to kind of distract your brain and see if that urge goes away. If it doesn't, go to the washroom, go pee. If it does, all right, keep going on with your day. You hit that next urge. And, at this one, because that's probably your second fill line, you might go to the washroom. You might try, knowing that, okay, I'm home. If I have a leak, it's okay. I can, do what I need to do.
Underwear. Yeah.
Yeah. Then, maybe see if you can do the same thing, and you relax and you breathe, and, you might do a few contractions and relaxations of your pelvic floor muscles and see if you can delay, that urge. So you can start to play with sometimes these cognitive behavioral therapy techniques
to make sure that it's not just all in your head.
Yeah. Or just, reacting to this urge and going, and knowing that if you're having kind of quick 5-second pees, you're not likely emptying your bladder. If you're having kind of a 10 to 15, sometimes up to 20-second pee, that would be like a real full bladder. Right. You're probably your bladder has become quite, full enough, and it's empty. And then you're able to empty it.
Is there any correlation that you know of which, for why? I know that some people have frequent urination in the day, but is there anything that's correlated with the pelvic floor health that has to do with it more being something that happens at night?
Yeah, there is. And again, kind of similar things. I think, and I don't quote me on this one because I'm not 100% sure, but I think they say over the age of 50, and I'd have to look that up, somewhere around there, that going once a night is normal or accept, is okay.
And is that because as we age, things just naturally are more of that loose rubber band?
Okay. I don't know. Maybe, probably, yeah. That's something that I'd have to look a little bit more into.
So approaching 50, going once a night can be considered normal behavior and healthy.
Yeah, and I don't want to be quoted on that.
No, that's okay. No, we won't hold Leslie to this. But I've heard that as well, for sure. I've heard that.
Yeah. Going multiple times, having to go out quite frequently. Mm-hmm. Is not, that would, I would say, likely be either a combination of the behavioral. I wake up, I feel like I got to go pee. I'm going to get up just in case and go. The just in case goes are actually not a good habit to get into either. I'm going to go just in case.
Yeah.
Because we're kind of training our bladder to, rather than to go through that full filling and emptying yeah, but there are things, it's interesting at how I really discovered this. It was before I had done my pelvic health training, but was working with a physio who was a pelvic health physio. And I was pregnant at the time with my first. And I said to her, I'm like, it's really funny because before I got pregnant, I would have to get up and go pee in the middle of the night. And now that I'm pregnant, I don't anymore. Oh. And isn't it supposed to be the other way around? Like, oh, that's so weird. And she said, would you, before you were pregnant, would you have a coffee in the afternoon? And I said, yeah, I usually would around 2 or 3. And she said, would you drink any wine or anything in the evening? And I said, maybe a glass. Yeah, maybe I would have a glass of wine. Those are both bladder irritants that I took out of my diet when I got pregnant.
Of course. Of course. Yeah.
And I went through, I think, my entire part, maybe not to the very end, but without having to get up and go pee at night.
Isn't that interesting? And isn't it interesting also that we know that alcohol and caffeine can be like real inflammatory irritants and impact the hormones as well. So it's one of these things that, like, as annoying as it is, but if you can pull these things out for a little while, likewise, any type of thing that is inflammatory to your gut. So like the 5 key gut inflammatory foods. If we pull these things out, it's a very holistic way of healing everything, like the bladder a break, giving the gut a break, giving the hormones a rest, like letting the body come to rest.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Okay. I know we could talk about this forever, and this has been so helpful. Thank you. It's what I was hoping, we could leave everyone with today is, if we understand that it is not normal. For me, it was like, I know when I was working out, I was peeing and I like leaking, well, I guess is a better way. And I thought it was normal. And you helped me understand why it's not normal. So these frequent urination, pain in your pelvic area, lower back, any type of chronic pain in that area is not normal. So first, let's just make sure we all know that these aren't normal things. You don't have to live like that. And it is a good indicator of your body saying to you, like, hey, it's time to pay attention to me.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
Any other symptoms that you can think of that would, be that indicator for women, especially women in our age box or in the perimenopause and menopause years of needing to pay more attention to their pelvic floor or their pelvic health?
Their pelvic health. I would say the main ones that seem to come up a lot in my I have had some women come in with fecal incontinence.
Okay.
They just would have a little poop every once in a while without really wanting to, not meaning to. But a lot of urinary symptoms, of frequency.
Discomfort or like around things going in and things coming out. I guess that's what you were saying. Right?
So whether it's pap tests, whether it's tampons, I've had some women say they either, if they use a cup, not being able to get it in or it just falls right out.
Okay.
that sensation of heaviness, pressure, kind of a tampon not being in the right spot when you don't have a tampon in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And
constipation is one that people are often surprised that there is that.
It's so interesting. And it, like you said, it's almost like this, when you think the pelvic floor health is almost like that glue that kind of brings everything back together. And so what would you say, I think breath work was one of the things that, you mentioned. What would you suggest for anyone starting to notice these and pay attention to these things? What would you suggest are a couple of first steps for them to work on at home?
Breath work would be one. And a nice thing with, one thing that doing the diaphragmatic breath or the belly breath where you're, I would have the person initially have a lie down on their back with their knees bent and kind of let their pelvis settle in, their shoulder blades relax, their head kind of get nice and comfortable. You might bring a pillow in if you can't relax head all the way down, just getting comfy. So your body isn't having to
hold tension.
Hold tension. Yeah. And then you might place hands on tummy and just start working on kind of trying to expand or balloon hands or belly and feel hands rise and fall.
Yeah.
Getting comfortable with that. For a lot of people, that is really awkward. They might breathe even opposite and they suck in their belly and they exhale and they release and they do this opposite breath work where they're creating more, again, pressure within that abdominal system. So working on that expansion, a really expansive breath. After I've spent a bit of time letting kind of people settle in and focus on belly, I would stick with the same breath pattern, that expansive breath, but I would just let my mind, my attention move to other areas, to the sides of the body and kind of feel how they shift out to the back of the body and feel how it settles down into the mat or the bed or the floor, whatever surface they're lying on, a little bit kind of firmer and then easing off with your exhale and then coming to the pelvic floor. And a lot of the times people initially say, I don't really notice anything there. Like I don't feel an expansion. I don't feel I'll usually say kind of feel for a change in pressure right down to the base of the pelvis, in between the legs, or think you're filling the pelvis up with your breath, with your inhale. And then as you exhale, kind of letting everything settle back inwards, using some visualizations. So whether you are working on kind of trying to find some engagement or connection, if you've got that weak pelvic floor that, tension isn't as much an issue, but it's more, I will use some visualizations to build some connection with, drawing objects up and into their vagina or their urethra or their anus, their rectum, and then releasing those objects. And so as you work on, or sometimes I'll say kind of thinking about a drawstring purse, if you're connecting all of them together. And as you engage, you kind of think about this drawstring, coming up the vagina up, and it's closing and lifting up. As you release, it's dropping and opening a little bit. So you can use visualizations. You can use visualizations to find length or relaxation. Maybe as you inhale, you imagine or you visualize a flower in the pelvic floor area. And as you inhale, the flower blooms. As you exhale, the flower closes or that bloom closes. And that helps connect because the
mind-body connection.
Yeah. Really even, I should say this to patients more, and I don't know why I don't. I'm going to. Looking and feeling. You can put your fingers inside your vagina and you can feel if when I engage, do I feel those muscles closing around my fingers? When I relax, do I feel that release? Taking a look with a mirror and trying to engage and relax, seeing and just looking and seeing what you see. Getting an idea of what it looks like.
That's fascinating, right? When we don't look at ourselves enough, right?
Yeah.
Again, this is a normalization in the patriarchy as well, teaching us from birth, like not to do those things.
You don't touch down there and you don't look down there.
Yeah, don't talk about it. Don't think about it. Yeah, especially women. Okay. And so I think that's really, really powerful, this breath work. And I mean, obviously added bonus, that's holistically going to, relax your whole, adrenals, your whole system and bring everything back into balance. But is there a certain amount of time we would feel like, would it be 5 minutes, 3 times a day? Like what is ideal for progress?
Do you know what? I am very much, I think I'm a little bit different from a lot of maybe other physios or typical physios in that I usually kind of go on that a little bit is better than nothing.
Of course.
And so, I know when I had my second child, after I had her, and it was a long year. And she was a little girl that did not like to be put down ever. And naps were often done in, a carrier during walks.
Yeah.
And I, in the midst of one of these walks, I felt that pressure, that heaviness, like I had a tampon in and I wasn't wearing one. And I thought, oh my goodness, I have a pelvic organ prolapse. And it was like, but I had not been, even as a pelvic health therapist, I was not taking good care of my body. I wasn't in a good place mentally and emotionally. Like it was a very rough time. But I was, 20 pounds lighter than what I am now. Like I wasn't eating.
Yeah.
For myself. I was always holding this baby that would not let me put her down. I'd fallen into a really slouched, poor posture because I was always holding this baby or having her in a carrier that it was just kind of a recipe for disaster, a recipe for prolapse or whatever, other symptoms. And so what I started doing was simply when I would put Lucy down for bed, I would lay down beside her for 5 minutes maybe, and I would lay on my back and I would start to just connect a little bit. I think I had also had, and 2 C-sections. So that, talking about the abdominals and the pelvic floor working so closely with as the core, both parts of the core, when I've had that, cut through 2 times and then didn't rehab afterwards because life and pandemic and mental health, all of this stuff. So I just started, whenever she had a nap, so it was probably a few times a day at that point, and I would take 5 minutes and all I would do is I lie on my back and I would kind of try to find my core support, my abdominals in particular, because I don't think I had really lost a lot of connection or strength with my pelvic floor. I had dealt with some other things prior to that where I really had to work on letting go of tension.
Yeah.
But I think this was more just that weakness through my abdominals and that I hadn't retrained. And so I spent, 5 minutes a few times a day, just starting to connect. And once I felt, okay, I've got this connection, I started challenging it with a little bit of movement of my legs, maintaining that nice, stable torso on my back and extending legs out, moving arms a little bit while I was on my back. And then transitioning into on hands and knees and playing with finding that
interesting
on hands and knees when I've got a little bit of gravity. And then, when I was out for a while, I gave up the walking naps, the carrier, because that was not doing me any good. Luckily, Lucy was at a point that she could be put down. And I started, building in every once in a while when I was in my kitchen. I have a mirror and I would do a few squats where I would really focus on maintaining a nice neutral pelvis and some core support, some gentle core engagement, not bracing, not tensing, weren't using my breath. And as I did these functional movements, just to gradually, and I'm at a point now where I don't feel my prolapse anymore. I've probably at this point, I think I kind of self-diagnosed myself as a grade 3 and I'm probably up to grade 1 now, which I don't really feel. So that's, it's nice. It's nice to know that even with that little bit, depending on what you can do, even if it's just starting to notice, okay, do I hold tension in my pelvic floor?
Yeah, and that really is the beginning, right, of any type of growth is the awareness. So,
Yeah.
If we women with anything today, I think it should, it's just one, bringing some awareness to the role this plays and the impact that is on our entire holistic health. And just beginning to pay attention. And that, for what you're saying, the very first step is just relaxing and breathing as much or as little as you can.
And just checking in, becoming aware. Yeah.
Listening to the whispers of your body.
Exactly. Yeah. And reaching out, the as much as you can find some not so great things on the internet, there's a lot more information on the internet now that you can kind of look in. Podcasts are wonderful. I am always listening to podcasts, and there's some good pelvic health podcasts.
Maybe what we can do, maybe you can let me know what those are, and I'll put them in the show notes here for women, for what they are. And, but this has been amazing. Thank you so much for it.
Oh, thank you for having me.
I know it's going to help bring a lot of awareness and help to a lot of women, and hopefully we'll begin to teach our daughters these things earlier in life.
Exactly. Right? Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Leslie.
You're welcome.
Day, and we'll talk again soon.
All right. Thanks.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining me on the Period Whisperer podcast. I want to encourage you to reach out to me directly and message me if there are topics or things you're struggling with, so we can address those right where you are at. And of course, if you loved this episode, if you learned something, make sure to share it with your friends, and please rate and review it wherever you get your podcasts.